next year.
11 3/4.
Yep. Next year, you turn 12. So we'll do it. That'd be awesome. But listeners, no, thank you so much for all that you guys do. We want to give a special shout out and thanks to all of our Patreon subscribers. You guys make this possible. It's because of your help that we're able to push this podcast out further, get us the things we need from our hosting plan right down to the equipment that you see here. We're able to do that because of you, and I want to thank each and every one of you. To do so, if you want to become a Patreon subscriber, jump on patreon.com/addictoathlete, and you'll see a bunch of different tiers to choose from. They all come with their special bonuses and features. You all the same. You have the list of
yes.
Thank today.
Absolutely. So we want to start with thanking our super fans, Christy Case, Brock Ellerman, Patrick Forsyth, Sensei KP Brown, Chris Williams, Brett Frew, Chris Ollie Davies, Tara Butson, Jerem Thurston, Tracy Whitby, Steve Riggs, and Karen Hardy.
Thank you.
Thank you, super fans.
Absolutely.
Our rookies, Wendell Wood, Earl Dyer, Sherry Polson, and Sione Mary Inuk.
Love them.
Thank you. And our pro level is my dad, Thurston. Thank you, Dad. And our champion level subscribers is Shad and Frey Robinson, Ron and Deloche, and Andrew Baird has now upped his pledge from a pro to becoming a champion.
Wow, Andrew, thank you so much, Andrew. Brother. Yeah, that is awesome. I look forward to doing some more runs with Andrew this year. There's a lot going on. I know that I got to run with him when we pushed, he pushed somebody else. He didn't push Emma. I did.
Yeah.
The neatest thing about that was he's like, don't wait for me. And then all of a sudden, bam, he took off and was gone.
Yeah.
And so he had Abby, I had Emma, and away they went. And they actually came back and picked me up. So thank you, Andrew. You hold a very special place in my heart, brother.
He's a good guy.
But again, Addict to Athlete, if you want to jump on there, it's patreon.com/addictoathlete. Well, listeners, we got lots to talk about today. Shoot, we're freshly back. This is why we missed our podcast on Monday. We returned from a little scant down to Las Vegas, Nevada to Rock 10K with about 35,000 other people.
35,000.
That's a lot of people in one place.
It was a lot of people.
Absolutely. And it was great times. It was really one of those things where you've got to see, believe it. We were actually able to run with Sensei KP and Holly and Josh. And the cool thing about, the Coach Holly, I didn't know she was going to be there till like the week before. And I'm like so excited to have her there.
Yeah.
But it was a great experience. This is an interesting run, especially when you look at it through the eyes of sobriety. You're going down to the place that just bleeds, like addiction, right? I mean, think about it, from legalized substances down there to drinking, in public, to gambling and to the sex trade. Everything goes on down there has a component to addiction. And it's an interesting thing when you take a step out of it and you look at it vicariously through a different set of eyes.
A different lens, yeah.
And it was really kind of a cool thing because we go down there and it's kind of a pinnacle race for the simple fact of there's to take in. You're literally running down the Las Vegas Strip.
One of the 2 times a year they shut down the Strip.
Yeah.
And to run down it at night with all the lights and
a little heads up to the race organizers. You kind of botched the beginning. You bottlenecked us and we were kind of sitting in place with, again, 35,000 people before we got to go through and walk the quarter mile to the starting line, which was funny. Hard rock, you gotta fix that. That was a little mayhem. Yeah, that's crazy. But the atmosphere, the music, everything was awesome. It was such a great experience. And again, it really does kind of like, I don't know, it echoes like what change and what happens when you shift your directions from all of that, addiction to doing something of greater value. And, when you run through the Strip, you're constantly reminded of all that, but you're doing something of greater value. You're kind of, leaving it behind, so to speak, right? You're erasing everything. And so, Marissa, this is the first time you got to go out there and experience it. I mean, you saw it from sidelines last year, and even with a interesting Achilles tendon issue, you guys got it. What did you notice? What was different between participating versus spectating last year?
It was much better to be on the road rather than on the side. And it was much colder this year, so I didn't really love that. But I don't usually get peer pressured into doing races. If I want to do a race, I'll do it. If I don't, I don't. No big deal. But last year when I watched you and Josh do it, I was just so enthralled with the energy. There's just, the people, the music, the lights, amazing. And I was like, I'm going to do this race. So even though I was injured and it took much longer than I wanted to, it was also much nicer because I just had to pretty much walk it. So I was on the strip longer and really enjoyed it a lot.
And there's so many people there that there's no way you're ever going to come in dead last. That's what's funny.
Yeah.
I mean, even the person that comes in last, I think, comes in with a group of people. Does that make sense, right?
For sure.
I'm not sure how that works. But the neatest part about it is just the whole like opposite mindset. It's, what once was to what is. It pretty much defines what Addict to Athlete stands for.
Yeah.
Erasing the old, replacing it with something of greater value, being able to be kind of a walking embassy of recovery. I got lots of people that kind of stopped and talked to KP and I, and we're talking a little bit about, if you can pat us on the back and say, hey, good job during the bullpen, people were talking about it. And it was kind of one of these things where you never know when you're going to be the catalyst for someone else to take that journey. We put out a little video today about not remaining anonymous anymore. And that was one of the things that we really were nervous about when we first started this team was what happens when people start understanding that, Addict to Athlete is a recovery support group. We've since expanded to mental health and a few other things, but nonetheless, and it was one of these things where it's just awesome to see how many people are also on this journey.
Yeah.
As we were walking up to the starting line, another lady had a bib number on the back of her shirt, much like what we did with our proxy bibs.
Yeah.
And it said, running in memory of, and it was this young man's name, Caleb, I think it was. And it was awesome because I asked her about it and she's like, it was my son who had a brain tumor and he's doing okay now, but she's running for him. And I got thinking how many people are really in the 35,000 pool are running for something greater than just, the experience running down the strip.
Yeah.
Probably quite a bit.
Oh, I'm sure. I know a lot of people are really motivated by being able to have a bigger purpose behind their running. Even our concept of just doing it for yourself and going out and trying to erase maybe negative things that you've done in Vegas to something very, very different by running down the strip and doing something physical rather than using substances. It's still, I'm sure a different shift in how do you change your brain. This is Sin City to
a recreation
like
spot.
That. Yeah. But I think it's a great way to start and trying to create new experiences and a new life.
So keep an eye out on the YouTube channel. We got some videos that'll be coming out promoting a little bit about what we did in Vegas sober and the race itself. So good experience all the way around. I ran proxy through that race. A recent podcast guest, Ed Bish, his son, so I was able to run for him. You ran for one of our past athletes.
Yeah, Mariah Fulbright, who passed away. I think it's been probably 6 years about now that.
Yep. Sensei KP, he bib number 2. And so he's going to contact the family and send that into them. So, it's one of these things that you're running, but you're running for a greater purpose. So continue to keep those that you love in your mind and in your heart when you're running. And it's amazing the healing process that can occur from that. So
for sure.
That was a good experience. We look forward to doing it next year. If you sign up before, I think the 5th, you get a little bit of a discount. I'm telling you, we need to get a group of everyone down there because it is a powerful experience when you have a group of people all geared up, dressed the same, kind of, you turn a lot of eyes, don't you?
Yeah.
It's a great platform to promote your recovery.
Be ready to be patient because, yes, that's a lot of people.
Live and learn, right?
To get wherever you want to go in Vegas, but also, that starting line, I think, maybe in 45 minutes from
about an hour.
We're going to start going to getting to the start.
Like I said, they botched it this year. They didn't do that last year. They kept everybody pretty corralled, but maybe it's so cold they wanted everybody to get out of there, bundle up, be warm together.
I saw some costumes that maybe try next year.
Nice.
Some LED lights, something.
Absolutely. I'd love to get Emma down there to push her. That was probably one of the most amazing things as we were making our way to the starting line, which was forever away. We got to see the disabled athletes and being pushed by their runners. And I started cheering for them. And it was funny because everyone's kind of watching, but once you start cheering for them, everyone started cheering for them. And you could see their smiles and they felt like little celebrities out there.
They went first. So that was fun to be able to see them take off.
So it would be fun to maybe get Emma and even Abby down there to be able to run there with them. But so who knows, but maybe that's something we can put into work for next year.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, we do have lots of others to talk about. Marissa, we've been been getting a lot of inquiry for some from child kind of, I guess, I don't know, ideas and understandings on what's going on with children, with teenagers,
Teens,
specifically about addiction. We've gotten some in the private practice. We've gotten a lot that have come through, the team here. You and I were kind of going through some questions that we'd received, and it looks as though there's a lot that maybe parents aren't really prepared for, or maybe even realize is happening now. We all know that with the invention of the vape pen, that it's become a huge problem in the teen world. It was crazy because, through the late 90s, early 2000s, tobacco use went way down with teens, way down, to the point where, the tobacco companies were kind of getting nervous about, are we going to be able to create lifetime smokers if they're not doing this? And things like the Clean Air Act and just the stigma of, what it is and how bad it can be. It really didn't work. Then the invention of the vape pen came, and it was promoted as a safer alternative, a little more clean. And what they're finding is, although some of those things are true, the repercussions are still quite profound.
There's a lot of people that can cut down on smoking by using vape pens. But I remember years ago, a few of our athletes doing it to cut down, and they ended up saying they ended up smoking more because it was a little more acceptable. It didn't smell, and they could smoke in more places that they couldn't cigarettes. And so they ended up increasing their addiction because it was, easier to do.
Absolutely. And then with things that they've been able to do with like oils and whatnot, you also see them using like tobacco and then THC and things of that nature. And I'm telling you, it's a new problem, and we don't know the long-term issues that we do with they say like traditional smoking, right? Yeah. Because it's still so new. These folks that have been using this for the past 5, 6, 7 years since they've been popularized, we haven't seen any long-term issues yet because
we don't know.
They're coming. Does that make sense?
Yep.
But it is challenging when you get parents or guardians of these young ones that have this stuff. And we have been asked quite a bit about, what does it mean? What do I do? There's so many levels of disconnection with family systems these days. We should jump into a little bit, but the recent survey that I found on the National Institute of Drug Abuse was kind of interesting. It talked about, this kit was released just in December, so it's fairly new.
Yeah,
and it talks about that reported substance use among adolescents held steady in 2022. It didn't increase too much, but it held steady. And I think that was kind of interesting because we're coming off the heels of COVID, which threw a lot of kids into this bizarre kind of like emotional funk. But it's still that nicotine vaping is the number one thing that they'll do. Yeah. So, they used to say marijuana is the gateway drug, which is kind of funny, because even that's kind of obscure these days. But really, truly, it's nicotine. And if you really wanted to get down to it, it'd probably be caffeine and sugar. So, you look at like what these gateway drugs are, it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
But vaping remained pretty stable through the grades that were surveyed. This is the grades 12, 10, and 11th grades. And they found that cannabis use remains stable for those three groups, but alcohol actually increased and illicit drug use actually increased. And so they did see some of that. And I think that's with the introduction of fentanyl that is pretty much in everything these days. We're seeing that there's increases there. And the scary thing is an increase slightly with the Vicodin, Oxycontin, and Percocets. And, we got to start looking at that Vicodin, Oxycontin, and Percocets will create in the future heroin addiction, simply because it's going to be easier to get than those pills.
Cheaper.
So we look at this and we think, okay, so then what can we truly do? What do we look for? What do we, what happens when, we catch our kids vaping or we catch our kids using marijuana?
Kids get caught at school. Yeah. How do you react?
Kids that get caught at school is kind of an interesting thing because it's kind of a double whammy, right? We have zero tolerance when it comes to that kind of stuff. And so there are big problems that can arise there. Now, again, if you remember, one of the things we have to be aware of is that you typically don't realize that your youth has an issue with this on average until about 2 years after they start. Now, sometimes you're lucky you catch it a little earlier. Sometimes it goes a little bit longer, but on average, it's about 2 years. Yeah. And the reason why is because it doesn't happen all at once. It's not something that just, cannonballs into your lifestyle. These things are subtle and they're explainable, right?
Yeah.
And then sometimes there's the full-fledged, proof. But in a world where we're so busy as parents to not slow down and to take, I guess, some stewardship stock of what our kids are going through, we could be setting ourselves up for some heavy, heavy issues later in life. You and I watched a show last night that was interesting. I wasn't going to talk about this, but it kind of fits into this.
Yes, it does.
I think it was called The Fallout.
Yeah.
The Fallout. It's a premise. It has the, what's her name? Jenna Ortega, who's Wednesday, right?
Wednesday, yeah.
She's in comes from a home of just her and her sister, and the parents are together, right?
Yeah.
And she goes to a school, and there's a school shooting, and it's right pretty much at the beginning, and the trauma, even though she didn't see anything, she experienced it through the feelings of being unaware because she was in the bathroom when the shooter came into the school,
and having it affect her friends and
her friends, and the situation of being scared in the stall, and another student come running in with blood on him, and it was a lot of traumatic kind of like I guess impassable emotions at the time.
Really, just watching how trauma can affect somebody and that fallout from traumatic events.
So the things that started to bother me were right out of the gate, where obviously she'd gone through some heavy trauma, and the people around her, they missed a lot of the warning signs, the isolation, the mute attitude, where it was kind of like being soft and being withdrawn. And you had one daughter who was a little bit younger, who wasn't in the school, that was still bubbly and excited and happy, and she seemed more in tune with what her sister needed than the parents. And that truly bothered me.
Yeah.
Without giving too much away, because I think it's worth watching, especially with your children. There were situations that kind of arose by which there were opportunities that parents completely missed because they didn't know how to approach the conversation.
Yeah.
And they kept on trying to reinforce the fact that you're going to be okay. You just need to X, Y, and Z. And that's not always the case.
Yeah.
And the other thing that was interesting is that
I thought it was very interesting it was probably within the first week of the shooting, which obviously it was hard on everyone, not just, but the family sitting at dinner and parents aren't saying a word. Not like, hey, let's, they were just like as shell shocked as the girl, which is understandable, but the younger sister was talking at dinner and that's it. And you were like, parents, talk to her,
say something.
She wants to talk about this. But they were just so shell shocked. They didn't say anything when they needed to.
They don't know how. And I guess that's understandable. It's hard to wrap my head around. I mean, I guess our kids get it double whammy because we both work in mental health and therapy and whatnot. But all in the same breath, there's also this humanality that needs to be a factor of this. Like, I think people have a real hard time discussing and talking about sensitive stuff because they don't know how to resolve conflict.
Feeling uncomfortable.
And so as it progressed, obviously the girl started to withdraw, stop going to school. They talked her into, they didn't talk her into it. They told her she's going to therapy. And the therapy session was hilarious because immediately this girl was like, feeding the therapist full of garbage, just kind of, I'm fine, I'm all bubbly. And of course the therapist would be like, yeah, you know what? You're doing pretty well. That happens a lot.
And at first, all the things they are going through are normal. It's normal to withdraw. It's normal to not know what you're thinking or feeling. That's all normal. But still, how do you, as a therapist, how do you suggest you address it when they are doing the normal things in reaction to a traumatic response? What do you encourage?
My approach is very different. I think, it's kind of funny. Now, parents out there listening, you have to find a therapist that is going to work for you and your family. This is a hard one because teenagers have a real hard time bonding. Obviously, I mean, it's one of these things. It's a weird situation in and of itself.
To just go an adult and being vulnerable.
When parents bring youth here, it's interesting. And so I do a lot of relationship building before we even start getting into the heavy stuff, which is kind of difficult for some people. A lot of people that don't know. I mean, I think that you and I are lucky because we worked with youth for so long before we got into adult careers here that it comes easy for us. But there's so many out there that, either try to build the relationship and stay there. Or
looks like we've got a call. Hold on.
That's so funny.
We'll come back to this topic.
That's funny.
Let's see.
We have to fix that. That's a little bit aggressive.
Yeah, that was. Hi.
Hi, are you there?
Welcome to the show, One-on-One with Coach Blu.
That's funny.
Hey, thank you. I just had a quick question. I'm in recovery and I've been doing good, but it seems like I've just been isolating and I've just lost my friend group. And what can to athletes do to just help someone who's isolating and needs to reach out? Just my question. You guys are really great. I love listening to your show. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Awesome. Wow. That was an aggressive ring.
Yeah, we've got to fix that.
What would you say, Miss Rec Therapist?
Early in recovery and isolating. So there's got to be some self-awareness. Like, just why are you isolating? What are you afraid of? Is it just making new friends? Is it, talking about that? And then I think it's just trying something new, something that you used to enjoy or something you've never done and are willing to try just to get out of your comfort zone. I think
it falls into kind of what we're talking about even right with the teenagers. Adults can fall into this as well.
Yeah.
And so maybe to continue that and tease that question out, because this young one was isolating. She was afraid to go out. She was afraid to go to school. They sent her to the therapist. She kind of fed her full of lines, because realistically, the last thing we want to do is also feel like we're broken. Because if someone else can kind of tell us that we're broken, then that means it's true. But if we feel like we're getting our head above the waterline, even though we know we're not, we can convince ourselves of anything.
Yeah.
And what happened was, because of the isolation that she put herself in, she started, making what's called trauma bonds with other people that experience the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Trauma bonds are very important to recognize. And a lot of times this happens when people find love in relationships in addiction recovery.
Mm-hmm.
Not a good idea to find a spouse or a partner in the group therapy or the program that you're going to. We can get into that in a whole nother level of podcast, but for the sake of time, the reason why is because these are mostly based off of trauma bonding, which means you've had this trauma, I've had this trauma, we can heal together.
Yeah.
But that doesn't typically work very well, because each person needs their own amount of attention and their own amount of time to heal.
But in those situations, you think, well, they understand me. I understand them. We've been through similar backgrounds. And it is unhealthy to isolate. So if I'm interacting with someone, at least I have a relationship and we're communicating and talking. However, it's important when you're looking at not isolating to seek out and find new healthy relationships, not someone else who's struggling with the same things, even though it's easy to connect with those people because they know and have been through it. You need somebody stronger to help lift you, rather than somebody on your equal playing field that fully understands what you've been through. That's easy to find. You need somebody to help lift you when you're worrying about that isolation.
And you also need to be okay with doing the heavy work yourself, because when you're trauma bonding, you're also giving so much to the other person because you want them to heal, and then you're left with what, right?
Yeah.
And so it's kind of an interesting thing. It's why, I've always said I'm so thankful that Marissa's never had an addiction history. Yes, she understands addiction. She understands the complexities of it. She understands the reasons behind it, but she's never experienced it. A lot of people would say, well, then she can't help anybody. Mm-hmm. Well, that's baloney, because she's still been through the same feelings and emotions. She just didn't use the same coping skills. And so she has a whole different idea and understanding on how to, how to create a stronger path of sobriety, of living.
Well, and things I was struggling with are different than what you were struggling with. So we weren't necessarily struggling at the same time. Mm-hmm. And that's where some of the difficulty arises when you are isolating and you're like, oh, well, I at least am interacting with these people, but you're all struggling in the same areas, which is deep and hard to pull out of. Don't find other people that are different than you. So
the parents, they were trying to help this kid heal. The problem was they didn't know what to do. And so they take therapy that didn't really work as well as they would hoped. I went to one session at the beginning there. And then started bonding with the students that had experienced it and got into some drugs and alcohol. And it was, you could see it coming. I'm like, this is so tragic, because I'm sure this happens repetitively throughout.
The emotions were so high that, they quickly began drinking a little bit to numb it out. And, there wasn't a lot. The one friend didn't have a lot of parental supervision. Her parents were out of the country. And so it was always over at her house. And doing things to, numb out those scary emotions that you've just been through.
Mm-hmm. And so the thing that kind of, for the sake of time, the thing that kind of bothered me were, again, with the parents' approach to this, when Jenna's character, when she finally decided to get real and get some of the stuff behind her, because she'd had some scary, situations that were going to cause long-term, I guess, emotional pain, she did start getting honest with her mom. And when she let her mom in, her mom did what? And I got so pissed. I'm like, damn that movie.
Yeah.
Why in the world would they portray it like this?
Mm-hmm.
And it got me thinking, because that's the way the world operates this, and it's so wrong. But tell me, you remember what they did last night?
So you could tell she didn't know how to approach her mom, so she just walked in and hugged her and then held her tight without looking at her in the eyes and just started telling her all the things that she'd been doing that she knew were
why
wrong.
she was afraid to go to school and everything.
Some of her fears, and her mom did great at that point. She hugged her. She said, "Thank you for trusting me," and was just trying to take these deep breaths and like, okay, how do I approach this? How do I approach this? Then the girl walks away, and the mom goes and grabs a glass and puts herself some alcohol, and not just taking a sip, like she's chugging it. And then she's like, deep breath. Okay, now let's talk some more.
Oh, I was so pissed when that happened.
Oh.
So what you're telling your child and what you're telling your family is that, I can handle your stuff, but I have to be numb and inebriated to be able to take it in.
Which is one of the things
Ridiculous.
she had come to her parents about doing, was drinking and using substances
to cover pain,
handle and cover the pain. And now she's seeing her mom do that, and all that's telling her is, oh, this is how we do it when hard things come.
So
subconsciously,
the dad did a great thing. That's what the dad did. The dad took her out to this little overpass looking out into the ocean.
Yeah.
And as she was describing to him a little bit about what she was feeling, she let the little F-bomb slip, and she's, "Oh, sorry, Dad." And he's like, "No." He's like, "Live it." And he gets up and he's like, "I'm mad as F that this happened to you," and then she gets up and she starts yelling, and then they start to scream and yelling, swearing
why they're frustrated, why they're sad.
And they had this awesome moment, and I was still like, what the F are you guys doing? Because they're both sitting there after they had this huge kind of like release.
Oh.
And she had to hug her dad. He didn't go to her.
Yeah.
I remember thinking, why wouldn't you I'm like,
she's being
hug your daughter.
She's being vulnerable.
Hug your daughter.
Now. Like, you let it all out. It's like a quiet time. Now go and hug your daughter. And he just stood there.
And when he didn't. And then you watch the movie, and it happens so fast and so brief that when she hugged, she kind of gave him a side hug, and then he grabbed her. It was pretty quick. But I'm like, why wouldn't you just do it right then? Like, comfort her.
Yeah. Well, and I think parents, they get to the point, it's easy to hug and cuddle an infant, toddler. And as kids get more into those adolescent and teenage years, it becomes more difficult but kids and teenagers, everyone,
adults,
still often need physical touch of some point. And so finding ways to like connect with your children, with your friends, whatever, to just tap them, joke them, and then even a side hug at first, like you've got to just be able to create safe emotional places that you can hug your children. They need it. They need it.
And so as I was looking at that, I'm thinking, I wonder how many families operate like that to one degree or another, where, they do as much as they can. But remember, you have to remind yourself that parenting, it means you parent out of your inconvenience.
Mm-hmm.
And people always look at me funny when I say that, but parenting on your inconvenience means that there are many other things you'd rather be doing or probably need to be doing, but it's very inconvenient to stay up until 2 a.m. talking to your kids when you know there's something wrong.
Yeah.
It's very inconvenient that you don't get to watch your football or your basketball or your baseball games on Saturday and Sunday because you're out there at theirs. It's very inconvenient that you have to, keep tabs on them and talk to them about pornography and about substance use. And, those things are inconvenient.
Yeah.
Inconvenient as hell. And there's a lot that we've missed in life because we've been parenting.
Yeah.
But now, all these years later, what do you notice about having a mindset of parenting out of inconvenience? What has it done now?
There's more of a long-term payback, because we didn't get a lot of payback in the time that we were spending extra time with our kids. But long term, we're able to, like you say, have that relationship with them, that when we ask them to do something that maybe they're not thrilled about doing, rather than just getting the screw you, I don't care. Like, we have a relationship, and so there's a sense of respect, and they give back without, I mean, don't get me wrong, our kids don't do everything we ask when we want them to, but I think it happens a lot more often than from other families I hear.
They've also been willing to tell us when things have gotten heavy and scary for them. Yeah. And, that's, to me, that's the ultimate. So, when we look at this, it's like, if you catch your kids vaping, or you catch your kids having, the pornography on their phones, or whatever it is, you've got to kind of pump the brakes a little bit, because a lot of this has to be, I guess in the frontal mind of yours, of your interpreting what's happening, that it may be new to you that you're catching this, but it's old to them.
Yeah.
And so your approach is going to be so crucial on either making that relationship stronger or severing it, completely.
Yeah.
So the first thing is, don't panic. Do not panic. If you panic,
so difficult.
What happens if parents panic, Marissa?
It scares the kids, and they retreat and they retract, like little turtles. They think they're going to come out and talk to you, and then they go, never mind, just kidding, go back in their shell, and it probably won't open up again. But it's so difficult, because often you see these things, and as a parent, you go, okay, I can see what can happen from this. You make these bad choices now, and you look 10, 20 years down the road and start freaking out. And they're just like, I'm here right now today, about today. And you ever up overreacting, and then they're going to hide.
100%.
And just be better at hiding what they're struggling with.
And chances are they're going to, because remember, they're using it for a very specific reason. They're not using it to be cool with the other cool kids. It might have started that way, but now if it's gotten to that point, they're using it for a reason. People that use tobacco, like products that are vaping, it's a stimulant. It helps them. I mean, they're like it or not, it does. Everything they're using, it has some reason for it. They're smoking weed. Yeah. If they're dabbing, if they're doing the dabs, pens, whatever it is, they're finding some kind of comfort from it. And now you're saying,
by the time they repeat it, they found a way that it works.
Yep.
That's why they're doing it again.
So the first thing is to provide an open and safe place to have that dialogue. That may sound a lot easier than you think. Well, shoot, we can talk to our kids, but can you? Because chances are you haven't been. When's the last time you had a really long, important conversation with your kids? I mean, think about that for a minute. I don't mean like, hey, do you have any homework or whatnot? It's, hey, tell me about so-and-so at school you've been talking about, or tell me about that class you went through. What was so hard about it? Or how much anxiety did you have about, swimming before that competition? It's about you having an open conversation with your kids.
Connection.
And if you don't have that with your kids, chances are you don't have that with your spouse. And if you don't have that with your spouse, where are you getting it from? Does that make sense?
And it's not just that, but where are your kids going to go to get that? Because they need it. And so what will they do? They'll go to their friends, which is fine. Everyone needs friends. Same with your spouse, and being able to connect. But it's so important to have the family connections like that.
In a relationship by which there's a married couple or partnership there, it's a lot easier. But I really think you need to start there. What is your relationship like with your partner? This might sound kind of silly. You're like, well, I caught my son with a vape pen. Why do I need to worry about my husband's relationship?
Yeah.
Everything. And the reason why is because typically what happens in family systems that get so busy is they forget that it takes two parents to be able to do the job. Mm-hmm. And, you can swear up and down that single parents can do it, and they do a damn good job. But I was raised by that, and there's a lot of shortcomings. When you have only one parent with eyes on the family system, it's extremely difficult because there's so many moving parts.
Yeah.
I mean, even with 4 kids, there are still times when I'm out of sync with what the kids are doing. Or
I'll say something and ask hey, have you noticed? And you'll be like, what?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Because I've got my eyes on the other ones. And so, there's this dialogue that has to happen. So before you even approach that, like, how are you and your spouse going to handle what's coming next?
Yeah.
So if you find it, pump the brakes, make sure that you have an emotionally safe environment to be able to start having this conversation. And I would never go in there with a pissed off attitude or an angry mindset, because that will just drive them deeper in.
Yeah.
You have to go in with a calm mindset of trying to find out what's going on, meaning open-ended questions. It's the search talk we do so much. We talk about in core communication on the team.
Mm-hmm.
You walk in and tell me, where did you get this? How long have you been doing it? If I ever catch you having this again, you're done. Like, you're grounded.
They're defensive. Yeah.
They're just going to be better at hiding it.
Yep.
But if you're like, hey, I noticed this, tell me a little bit about what's going on, or help me understand what you're using this for. Like, where did you, when did you start using it? What's it do for you? You start opening up this dialogue, and you can start getting answers to some questions.
Panic. And if you can't do that, then you need to find a place. Maybe you need to take a time out. You need to calm down, whatever. Even if it is maybe emotionally, you'll just break down and cry the whole time. You need to address that before you go and try to have an open conversation.
So if you have a spot where you can have an emotionally safe environment, which means that the dialogue can freely be exchanged, you've got to make sure that then that next step is that you give information without exaggerating the facts. So now I know why you haven't been, willing to come participate with family activities, or now I understand why you're failing math class, must be this. And once you start doing that kind of stuff, you lose all credibility to what the main concern is, which is, I guess, what is the main concern? Your relationship maintaining kids, or getting them to stop?
Yeah.
I would say maintaining the relationship. This is a funny thing, parents. Relationships before rules. What does that even mean? I love it when I talk about this, because people are like, what the F?
What is it? Yeah. It's a tough one.
Think about it. You have to have a relationship with your children, with your coworkers, with whatever it is, before you can really hold down rules. Which means that parenting out of inconvenience stuff again. Meaning, there's a reason your kids are using it. If you have a relationship with them, you'll be able to have that open dialogue and conversation to find out what it is, to hold the rules. And then when you hold the rules in place, they understand where you're coming from. It's like this. And I tell you this a lot. My boys would come home one day, hey, Dad, I want to go over to so-and-so's house. I'm like, yeah, no, not tonight. And they're like, well, why? Well, yeah, why? Why did I say no? Well, it might be inconvenient for me if we decide to go to a store, or if we got track them down, or find them when it's time to eat dinner, whatever. But that's not on them. That's on me. But why was I so quick to say no? And what I've decided to do when I'm like, I guess you can go, I guess there's really no good reason for me to say no.
Yeah.
Is like, if it's a no and a definite no, there's got to be a reason why.
Yeah.
Because
I said so.
Which is not always easy, because guess what? Because I said so doesn't work. It never has, never will. But if you can earnestly and honestly tell them why it's a no, they're going to respect that. And sometimes it may be, I have a really bad feeling about where you're going and what you're doing. I call me crazy, but this is what I'm thinking. Help me understand, where you're coming from. Have some conversations with it.
Yeah.
And then guess what, parents? If it is a definite no, you get to help. You get to help the opposite of whatever happens next. No, you can't go. And then you go do your thing, and the kid's like, well, piss.
And then they just home bored.
Yeah. So it's like, hey, we'll come up with some ideas. And this is where rec therapy comes into play, right? Like, guess what? Parenting out of inconvenience. If that's a no, then you get to help build that relationship through doing something else.
Yeah.
We've talked about this before, where even an adult child with his dad, a friend of the families that we know who struggled with some addictions to painkillers and painkills, and this adult father took his adult son on a road trip.
Yeah.
You help him get clean, to do all kinds of service.
Like 3 weeks.
Now that had to be extremely taxing on a lot of different areas of life, because these guys were busy.
Yeah.
Right. But parenting out of inconvenience, even as an adult.
Yeah.
So, the next one to be explain the consequences. Now, consequences aren't always bad. Sometimes consequences are good. And consequences have to be very clear and defined, and natural consequences will work 1,000 times better than the the made up consequences, and it's kind of like this. Ground your kids, right? You're grounded. That's a consequence. Okay. Well, then what are they doing while they're grounded? You can't go outside. You can't go, you can't hang out after school. You're just home every day.
Yeah.
Well, then what? They're just sitting on the couch staring at the ceiling.
That's not going to help them.
And then how long do you ground a kid for the crime they committed, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny. I remember hearing this from a friend and trying it about like, how long are you grounded for? Like, ask them, how long do you think you should be grounded for? They're like, well, maybe a week. Do you think it's going to take you a week to know what you did was wrong? Well, no. Well, then how many days? Maybe just the weekend. Okay. Do you think it's going to take you the whole weekend to know what you did was wrong? Well, no, not really.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then what? Well, maybe just the day. All right. Do you really think it's going to take you the day? You see where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
And the thing is they're always going to be harder on themselves. But then, what do you do, parents? Do we just, all right, okay, it's a week. You said so. My parents, whenever that happened, after 3 hours post whatever happened, it was business as usual. And see, I'm leaving. That makes sense?
There's got to be, whether it's long or short, whatever, just talking at the end. What did you learn? What are we getting from this? Where are we at as a parent-child?
Yep.
And then moving forward.
Find some help if you need it. And be prepared, parents, that you're going with them. No therapist is going to fix your kid. It's not going to happen. But as a family, we can heal this together and we can figure out what's going on and we can open up dialogue. Most parents, most families are terrified of therapy because they're worried that they're going to get called out as bad parents.
Yeah.
And you're not. Do you have stewardship in it? Absolutely. You have stewardship in their successes and you have stewardship in their follies. Mm-hmm. But they're their own people. And so if you're so afraid that you might receive some bad news or maybe be asked some hard questions, then maybe you should come to therapy by yourself first.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Because what we want to do here is get to a playing field by which all of you understand the roles that you play. And all of you guys have the trust in one another to make it a dynasty championship team.
We're trying to learn and grow and become better. And that's the whole point, rather than, oh yeah, it's just my child or my spouse that has the issues and problems, fix them.
Mm-hmm. But if you've never been tongue lashed by one of your children and taken their feedback seriously, then you're delusional. I think we've talked about this in the past where like our kids have called us out. And how can you debate when they're telling the truth, right? Like you said that the family comes first, yet you're not here, you're doing this and that. And I'm like, you're right. I have to put some of that other stuff on hold. That's always a bitter pill to swallow.
Yeah.
Even when one of the very first things that ever happened to, Boston's almost 15 now, turned 15 in a couple of weeks. And when he was a little guy, I would tease him when commercials would come on for kids' toys that were girl toys. And I'm like, hey, Boston, do you want that? And, he was maybe 2.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I don't want it. I was just like teasing him and whatnot. And one day I'm home from work and Marissa's like, you need to go talk to Boston. And I'm like, why? He's like, he needs to talk to you. And I'm like, well, what does he need? And she wouldn't tell me. She's like, it's between you and him. So I go up and downstairs and he's watching TV. Literally, I sit down and he turns the TV off with the remote, a 2-year-old. And he looks at me and he's like, I said, boss, Mom said there's something you want to tell me. And he's like, yeah, I do. And he looks at me and he's like, when those commercials come on and you tease me about that, it hurts my feelings. A 2-year-old talking to his dad. And I'm like, there was an impulse in me that was like, quit being a pansy.
It's no big deal.
I'm joking around, knock it off. But you guys, he was being serious, and thank heavens I didn't say that. What I said was, oh, buddy, I'm sorry. I didn't know that hurt your feelings. And it hurt my feelings that I hurt his feelings. And I had to swallow that. But he was like, hey, I want to make it right.
Yeah.
You know how humbling it is to have your children tell you where the bear poops?
And I've often responded very poorly in those situations, but it's still okay later to go back and be like, hey, I'm sorry. I said it was no big deal. That is a big deal. And I appreciate you coming to me. Mm-hmm. That's simple. When you're a little more calm, where you've thought about it a little bit more and not just your reaction of, whatever, it's not, just knock it off,
Mm-hmm. We had another situation where on our daughter's birthday in September, family was going through a little bit of a crisis that you were very instrumental in.
Yeah.
And, as one of our daughters kind of flew out, and everyone's just seeing the logic behind it, it didn't sit well with her. And she still had the right to express her disapproval, despite the fact that, we didn't have any grounds or merit. And it made the birthday dinner really hard to swallow, but yet we came around because she still felt that way and needed to feel validated as though she was heard, even if we didn't, agree with her.
Yeah, we had to let her express it. And there was some emotion and loud voices, but later it was also like, hey, well, when we're both calm, let me explain my side. And then you explain a little bit more of your side. And thank you for sharing still.
Your approach, listeners, whether it's a child, whether it's a sibling, whether it's a spouse, is going to be crucial. All of these ideas and whatnot, they all work. It doesn't matter if it's your child or not.
Yeah.
But you can make or break a relationship with this kind of stuff, and so take your time. Parenting of inconvenience is not easy. Asking for help and finding the right source of help is really important.
Yeah.
But being open to understanding that it's happening for a reason. What I've noticed is most kids that are using things like THC, they're doing it because there's depression there. And they don't know.
Not just because they're hanging out with the wrong crowd. I know that's an easy question and it's easy to put it on someone else, but I can promise you that may have been how it started, but they wouldn't keep using it if it wasn't working for something.
No, so we need to peel back the layers and find out, is this something that we need to have a doctor take a look at?
Yeah.
I don't know if the people out there in the airwaves or on video land understand this, but legalized marijuana is a tool to use now for medical purposes. In the state of Utah and other places, it's not. It's recreational too. We have to be careful with it. We have to be, we have to really kind of speak with doctors about it. But on the same breath, we can't take it off the table anymore either. It's happening for a reason, and it's not just to get high and to hang out with friends and eat Doritos. That's not the same mindset that we're seeing with the kids that are doing this.
Yeah.
There's legit reasons. So, be cautious with it because it could be coming from 9 times out of 10, it's coming from somewhere else. It's not coming just for the fact they want to party.
Oh yeah.
And I highly recommend getting some assistance, but finding a counselor or therapist that really understands the family dynamic. No one's going to be blamed for the problem, but we all can take accountability for, our stewardship in it.
And it may be a gut punch. That's why most people, I think, avoid it because they're like, I don't want to hear that. That's going to hurt.
Absolutely. But
again,
always a gut punch.
You're an adult. You're the adult. They're the child. If you want to have a better relationship, if you want to be a better person, there's going to be some things said that are uncomfortable.
Absolutely. Weaning down and kind of going through the motions and whatnot, understanding where they're coming from, getting some other solutions and whatnot. We have resources available on addict2athlete.org to help maybe guide you down the communication path. We have lots of information on how to kind of keep those communicative parts of your relationship open. Addict2athlete.org, you'll find a lot of cool stuff there. So a lot of good questions, specifically that, what we're seeing in ships and family systems, especially during the pandemic, we noticed, there was a lot going on with our teens. There's a lot of mental health issues. There's a lot of emotional turbulence they went through, and it's only getting more challenging and more difficult with social media, with TikTok and all that stuff. It's crazy. You're competing with a lot of outside influence.
Yeah.
We were talking about it last night, even with this movie. There are a few scenes that I'm like, our kids watch this, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I guess you can't shelter them forever. They're going to have to see it, but we have the dialogue open to talk about it when and if they have questions. So yeah. Anything else? That's probably the biggest topics we had today. We had 2 or 3 questions about that. So I hope that helps. Go check out that movie, listeners. It helps you kind of maybe understand where the dynamic in the family system comes from. Yeah. On Netflix, I think. Was that Netflix? I think so. It was. Yeah. Not Google it, you'll find it. But beyond that, remember to kind of keep your eyes on the webpage. Lots of activities and things coming up. We have our new gym across the way opening up. I can't wait to show all the athletes that, get some more room to work out. But really remember, Addict Athlete's a resource for mental health and addiction recovery. Whether you tune into our live broadcast every Tuesday, or if you come here, and we'd love to kind of get you set up into a path and I guess a direction to not only just maintain your sobriety, but to be able to really gain strength from it. And so check out all of our links. Everything can be found there, contact information. And until next time, please continue to turn